Hello everyone, welcome once again to On the Couch with David and Travis.
This was episode 5. I'm going to go with the second, because they always give 2 titles, but it seems like I like the second
one's
one
always
more.
better.
So I'm going to go with the second title, which is Ray 1, or, yeah, we'll say that for now.
Yep, Ray 1.
For me, this is the first episode that I think really starts to click. I greatly enjoy this episode for quite a few reasons, and I think we're starting to see sort of the semblance of what's to come here. I think before it was just sort of a very normal show, and it's still not that unconventional at this point, but we're starting to ask more questions about the characters in the world, and when the show is getting us to ask questions about the characters in the world like so, eventually we can get to the point where we're asking questions about the real world and ourselves. So I think we are making a big step in that direction. The first time I watched this show, I really didn't like Ray. But watching it again, I really enjoy the character. I think it's a wonderful arc, and again, we're at the very beginning here, so we have a lot more sort of to cross with that. But I think, Dave, do you want to give your thought, just your broad thoughts?
I know, for me, I feel like this episode, to me, they are trying to set up Ray as a mysterious figure, like somebody you want to know more about, and I just feel like I don't really want to know more about her. I feel like there's I've seen characters before where it's like, oh, they're like very short with everyone and they aren't very social. I don't know, and to me, it just seemed like she's not a very interesting character at this point.
See what you're saying? I love it, because that's exactly the point. This show does this beautiful thing where it sets up these characters, the main characters, but also the secondary ones, where you look at Shinji. Oh, he's the anime hero who's nervous and uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Misato is sort of the fiery older woman figure. Rei is the submissive, like you said, short with people. These are cliches, these are tropes, not just in anime, but in all storytelling.
Yeah.
And right now we're getting at the point where we're setting all those cliches up.
Yeah.
And I think, at least for me right now, I think it's intentional of the show. I think it wants you to think, I'm just watching another submissive... I think it's supposed to be a very direct reference to sort of submissive anime characters that are supposed to appeal to the audience in sort of a but a destructive and almost sexual manner.
Well, and it's very, especially her relationship with Shinji's dad, it's very much in the vein of characters where it's like, I'm here to service you, master, kind of thing.
And I think that's, for me, interpreting this as I see it, I don't know exactly what it is, but I think giving the audience, somebody who hasn't seen this, that feeling is 100% intentional.
And I think it's intentional, but right now, her character is just not interesting to me at all.
But here
which isn't a bad thing. It's just, it is what it is.
But we set this up here. We get to the point where we see these cliched characters, like, oh, I've seen this before, but then this is what the show does. It says, now why would a person be this way?
Mm-hmm. What
makes a person do this? And then it humanizes it, and that's what brings it to the next level and elevate.
Okay.
So, for a while, you're just going to be like, oh, I know Ray, but I feel like people watching this do not know.
Well, I don't know her.
No.
But at this point, I don't care to know her.
No. And I think I didn't particularly my first time around either. I thought she was a boring character. I thought, oh, this is the one guys are supposed to be like, they do make sort of sexualized action figures and stuff for her still. But that's what I feel like the demographic is supposed to be. But I feel right now, going through my second time, that is not the case.
Well, and the scene where him and Ray are in Ray's room together, it's a very strange tone they're trying to set.
I'm glad you brought that up. I love that scene. I love how they did that.
I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why. It's that mix between we're going to use the trope, they meet for the first time and she's naked. But it's different than what we were expecting, but I feel like it wasn't different enough to where it could be seen as subversive.
See, I completely disagree. I think this is obviously a trope we've seen a lot of times. This scene, not just the fact that she's naked, but you fall on someone, is touching the breast, that sort of sexualized encounter. But I think what this show does differently, and it's a great sort of introduction to what's going on here, is that it's not played for laughs, I don't think at all. And I don't think it's played for sex appeal either. I think it's played exclusively, how I saw it, as an uncomfortable moment. Yeah. It's supposed to be uneasy and uncomfortable. And I think there's just a lot of nuances to that scene, because Ray doesn't get embarrassed. She doesn't get angry. She slaps him, but that's later, and that's another big thing. She doesn't even understand why somebody would be embarrassed at something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, for me, sort of a very interesting take on what's going on.
And I think for me, it just seemed... It didn't seem awkward enough.
Mm-hmm.
Which I know, like, if you watch the scene, and it is very awkward, but it's not... It's like... I think there's... For me, I'm trying to forget, like, the societal consciousness of what scenes like that look like. Because scenes like that are often played for sexualized manners or for laughs, that it's hard for me to disassociate that association.
Well, no, I
scene
understand
itself.
completely. I felt the same way sometimes watching this. You're kind of struggling where, is this really what I'm watching? Is this just another thing? Or are they doing something differently with it? And sort of that decision where you are is sort of something you have to make, and sort of maybe even have the show convince you or convince yourself. And I think that's the perfect sort of somewhat skeptical, uncertain mindset to go into watching this show. You should be able to look at it, and it's going to give you a lot of puzzle pieces, but it's not going to give you the full answer.
I think Rei's reaction was fine. I think it was Shinji's reaction that kind of threw off the scene for me, because he was very much like nervous and embarrassed, and like a typical person in that situation would be, which I think they tried to use to highlight Rei's like indifference. But to me, if you're going to do that scene, it has to be, and you want to be subversive, it's got to be completely subversive. And for me, I felt like Shinji's reaction was too realistic to the situation to feel like they're actually trying to do something really subversive with it, which I know sounds strange because, again, his reaction is used to highlight her not reaction, but I feel like it's just so, like, both reactions are so not, I feel like they're not nuanced enough for the scene, where it's like she is very robotic about it, and then he's like the opposite. And I feel like there had to be a meeting in the middle between.
I understand what you're saying. I do disagree, but I understand.
Yeah.
So moving on, I think it's a great episode for me. I think it's a great episode to sort of introduce Rei. I wish we would have gotten it earlier, but at least now we have what's going on. And I think, part of me is a little bit conflicted on this because it is very intentionally mysterious, like, and that's kind of, I don't want to say contrivance, but sort of like a manipulative thing where it's like just wanting to find out what happened doesn't make good storytelling. But I think this does it in a good way where we're seeing, okay, first of all, this episode poses a lot of questions, both about the character and the world. What are the angels? Who is Rei? Why is Rei so emotionally muted around everyone except Gendo? Why are the glasses so important to her? How does Shinji feel about this? I think there's, again, it's not to the full extent we'll see, and it's not the full extent I would want, but compared to what we've seen, it's like, we saw an episode that I think sort of insulted our intelligence. I saw one that didn't challenge it, but I think now it's really starting to, at least in some way, get us to think.
See, and I think for me, I want it to be that next level, and it just didn't make it all the way.
Yeah.
I felt like it was too reliant, like, and I understand subverting tropes is important. I felt like it was too reliant on those tropes. Like, he rang the doorbell, the buzzer doesn't work, he opened the door because it was unlocked, she doesn't look at her mail. Like, I don't know, it just felt like a very stereotypical scene, and while it might pay off later, I felt like for this episode, it just didn't do it enough. It didn't foreshadow enough that it was going to be subverted later.
Part of me also feels like, I don't think it's a fantastic episode. I'm also sort of comparing it to the ones we've just seen, and I just think it's a step up from that, certainly. I don't think we're at where we need to be or where we should be, even, for the show, but I think it's just an improvement from what we've seen in that aspect. I didn't get that much out of the first 4 that we watched, where I was like, what's going on here? And I think, again, and this is kind of throwing you in the dark here, but there are a lot of little touches here I noticed, again, second time through stuff. I think the scene where they're testing Unit 1 and it kind of goes out of control.
Unit 0, you mean?
Unit 0. Right. I think, obviously, it's important to pay attention to Gendo's reaction to that, but there's one other character in the scene that I think also has a very important reaction to it. And you see a few more things this episode that's, again, setting up something. So this is just giving me more evidence, I feel like, that in some way this was all planned out.
Okay.
Just because, and that's something I was struggling with from the beginning, is it an accident? Are we doing it? But I'm really starting to feel like they did say they knew where they were going to go in some small way.
Okay.
And there's some touches there. We're going to talk about this more next episode because it's still coming out, obviously, but I really like the design of the angel from this episode.
It's interesting.
It's an octahedron. That's actually all it is.
Yeah.
And for the other ones, they've at least looked something like something that exists, be it a human or
an animal
or genitalia. But no, it's a giant octahedron, and it's
which is interesting.
It's interesting.
It made me do a double take when I first.
I don't know the value of it yet, but it's interesting. The only other things I wrote down is I really like that moment where, again, Shinji is kind of like, what's wrong? And he's like, oh, nothing. And then Masato kind of calls him out on it. It says, hey, you know when you say nothing, you're just begging for attention.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you wouldn't see like that sort of like call-out moment in a more conventional show, I don't think. And then the other thing was, it was kind of stupid when the guys were like, oh, check out the girls, their breasts, their thighs, their calves. But at the same time, I was thinking, well, that's how 14-year-old boys talk.
Trust me, I know.
So it's
I know.
Oh, okay.
I would spend time with them every single day.
Watching the scene felt kind of, I don't know, it just felt kind of dumb to me. But at the same time, it's like, well, yeah.
And maybe that's part of why I didn't like this episode so much. It was very all over the place in terms of tone. Mm-hmm. Like, we had the scene with the penguin, which doesn't really match up with the rest of it.
The whole scene with Masato getting drunk. And I think we're going to see less and less of these comedic moments because they aren't incredibly funny. And they do feel... I think
the comedic moments felt more in place with the last episode because it wasn't quite as trying to be quite as serious. It was still serious, but like having the lighter moments worked a little better in that episode than this episode, I think.
So, I mean, where we're at right now, I'm more comfortably in the point of, okay, I'm excited, this is good, let's watch more. David, you're still kind of on the fringe, right?
I'm not on the fringe. I want more.
Oh, yeah.
And I think with Rey, I'm not sold.
Mm-hmm. Again, the first time I watched this whole show, I was like, Rey's a stupid character. I don't like that.
I don't think she's a stupid character. I just think it's not being portrayed as well as it possibly could, and I hope it gets better in the future.
Next time we're watching episode 6. We're only on 5. Feels like we're farther than that. Okay.